Hey, it's Alex Williams of the New Stack. Welcome to the New Stack Makers, a podcast where we talk about application development, deployment, and management at scale. The Cloud Foundry Foundation is our sponsor for these podcasts that we did from the Cloud Foundry Summit in Boston, Massachusetts. Cloud Foundry is used by enterprises around the globe to automate, scale, and manage cloud applications throughout their life cycle. Learn more about Cloud Foundry at cloudfoundry.org. T-Mobile is a telecommunications company, and like any telecommunications company, when new releases come out of new devices, the infrastructure has to manage that load. But what about innovation? How does that infrastructure become an innovation hub for new application architectures when the focus has to be on supporting customers? It's a challenge that T-Mobile faced and worked with Tibco to find new ways that they could build out their architecture using Cloud Foundry and building stacks that reflected a more loosely coupled approach. Enjoy this interview with the T-Mobile and Tibco teams from the Cloud Foundry Summit. Thanks again. Talk to you soon. Hey, it's Alex Williams of the New Stack, and we are here at the Cloud Foundry Summit in Boston, Massachusetts at the Convention Center. It's our first interview of the day, and I'm lucky to have the team from T-Mobile and Tibco. There's a story here. What's the story here? Why don't we start with you and introduce yourself, and then go down the line. Everyone can say hello.
Sure. Yeah. Kris Wilson. I'm a director of IT development at T-Mobile. Been there about 9 years, so I've seen T-Mobile kind of grow from that 15, 20 million subscriber company to the 73 million we've got today. And I manage a couple different teams. I manage a team of customer information developers, focused primarily on our customer information domain, our identity management domain, and then where Chandra in this story kind of comes in our digital integration center of excellence, so our middleware stack, if you will.
Mm-hmm. So I'll go next. I'm Rahul Kamdar. I'm from Tibco, Director of Product Management and Strategy, responsible for what we call the application integration stack, some of which obviously the T-Mobile team has been using. I've been with Tibco for about 10 plus years now. Started off as a developer, spent some time in the field. I've also worked with a bunch of our customers using our solution, so I know the pain as well, I think. Yeah, here I am, hoping to obviously continue helping T-Mobile with their transformation.
So let's talk about the journey that T-Mobile's been on, and how Tibco, has been working with you.
Yep.
I'm curious, first of all, about what you just said, that T-Mobile's gone from 15 million subscribers to 73 million subscribers. Yep. That requires just a lot of heavy lifting all the time to make sure the infrastructure is working.
Yep.
And you can end up spending a lot of time just focusing on what's working.
Yep. Yeah.
How do you make that shift to focus on new application architectures?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a journey. If you look at where the architecture was 9 years ago when I joined, we had the SAPs, Tibco obviously, and legacy products. You've got Siebel in there, a lot of COTS applications, and then at the heart of all this, you've got a billing system where, just like with many telcos and things like that, we've built a lot of our logic and brains behind that billing system, things that probably don't belong in a billing system over the years. So the journey really required us to start breaking down the architecture itself, change the culture a little bit on the people side. And again, it wasn't something we did overnight. It took us 5 or 6 years to grow the subscriber base, and it took us 5 or 6 years just to transform the technology stack.
So Chandra, you're right in the middle of that, right? Like, with the middleware itself, you're actually in the middle of it.
Okay.
Can you talk a little bit about the transformation of your middleware and how that has had to adapt into this new world of Cloud Foundry architectures and modern application development?
Sure. Yeah, the first thing, right, I mean, we were a big legacy system, so we were very rigid system, and we don't have the scalability features, the circuit breakers, right? All these digital terms that came with Tibco and Cloud Foundry, right? So it was a big mental shift for the team members too, right? I mean, right now we are doing the CI/CD, right? Automatic testing, A/B testing, circuit breakers. So all these features came with PCF and Tibco, and we are doing some amazing stuff. I mean, I mean, we used to worry about the capacity in the previous days, but now we don't worry about those things.
Yeah, I mean, a good example in the telco space, there's a very popular device that comes out in September every year. Lots of people have it, and it used to be that we had to plan 6 months ahead to start scaling out our architecture to handle the volume of that new device launching.
Right.
And this is, not as simple as us, running perf tests.
Right.
This is us having to rack and stack new hardware. We were, having to put it in docks and everything else like that. And then every app across every tier is having to scale up. And now it's about the elasticity of Cloud Foundry. It's about, making sure that we've got the right parameters set up to scale and that the overall PaaS has the capacity, but that's it, right? It's not every application having to go out, find new hardware, install it, get it tested, put it through a non-production environment, get into production. That timeline went from 6 months to, 4 weeks, right?
Interesting. So Rahul, can you tell us a little bit about Tibco? And I'm curious about the Tibco story. I started covering Tibco 5-10 years ago. I went to a few of the conferences. There was 1 year I went and I got to interview one of the basketball players from the Sacramento Kings because the Kings are owned by the Tibco founder, right?
I was curious how that had to do with Tibco.
Yeah.
So, and it's probably a good time to have this conversation then, because we've undergone a lot of transformation ourselves over the last 3 to 4 years. And in fact, what you mentioned, right? Our former CEO originally used to own the Golden State Warriors, now moved into Sacramento Kings, and over the last 5 or 10 years, I mean, obviously seeing the market as well, we've undergone a transformation, both culturally as well as from a technological standpoint. And I think T-Mobile is a very good example of how the technology has evolved as well. Traditionally, obviously, we've done a lot of application integration. We've done things like ESBs, the Enterprise Service Bus, and which is again something that was in place at T-Mobile. About 3 or 4 years back, we started this partnership, for example, with Cloud Foundry, and we started taking some of our core product stack and made it, native to the environment inside Cloud Foundry. Now, part of it obviously was a learning experience, and part of it obviously was, us trying to apply some architectural shifts that we wanted to. I would say we have been a little bit lucky as well, that over the last couple of years in particular, we've worked with some very good customers. And I mean, not just because they're here, but I think T-Mobile specifically is a good example because I think the one thing that T-Mobile has really gotten right is, any technological shift is probably part technology and part people or part culture. And it's very difficult to get both of those things balanced and right. And I think they have done a fantastic job at that. In fact, if I remember right, early last year when we actually started off, this engagement, it was a very ambitious plan in the beginning, at least for us, I would say that. But I think this, the 6 to 7 months of the first phase were a very rewarding journey. And Chandra, for example, I think we've had a lot of engaging conversations, if I may say that, with him and his team around that journey. So yeah, I think with customer use cases, with customer implementations, obviously Tibco's undergone a lot of change as well. For example, I mean, we've never done open source in the past. For the last 3 years, we've been, all our core technologies are now centered around open source projects that we promote ourselves as well. I think that's very key to, the strategic shift, the technology shift that we've made, along with obviously some good customer
How's
stories.
T-Mobile opening up then as a result?
If you just go out to, I think it's opensource.tmobile.com, and you see, what we've done just with the last several projects that we're committing out there to the community. I mean, T-Mobile 5 years ago, we weren't exactly known for engaging the tech community, right? And if you take a look at really what we're trying to do, the open source project at T-Mobile is a good example. We want to be a bleeding edge technology company. We don't want to be thought of as one of the wireless carriers like a Verizon or Sprint that are stuck in the mud, that are kind of slowly changing things. You look no further than John Ledger, our CEO. He's a fast-talking, fast-moving, puts his money where his mouth is, usually puts requirements out on Twitter that we have to deliver a couple weeks later, in the form of promotions and campaigns and things like that. And that's part of the culture shift that we've done. But a good chunk of it is just engaging in the community. I mean, we didn't get out to conferences like this and do these sorts of things in the past.
No. So do you have an open source office?
We do. Yeah. We've got I wouldn't say a large team that we've got running it, but we've got 10 to 15 individuals who, when they're coming to work in the morning, they're thinking about that innovation and that next big thing. And it's technologies like blockchain, it's Lambda architecture. It's across the board.
Mm-hmm. So now with Tibco, you embarked on what exactly? Tell us about that journey.
Yeah. If you take a look at our architectural history, SOA was a big buzzword 5-6 years ago, and so T-Mobile was very much a service-oriented architecture. We had this big service bus, and this middleware stack we had, transports 250 million transactions a day. Right? These are things as simple as making a payment or doing an upgrade on your device or doing an activation. All those transactions went through our stack. About 70% of that stack was based on Tibco and their BusinessWorks product, but damn, it took a lot of hardware to power that, right? It was 800 servers in productions and silos and a lot of messy deployments and things like that. The journey that we embarked on a year ago, we had a successful, and Chuck Nossman, our VP of technology and strategy, was up there talking a little bit about it today. We started with one call in a different app, not in Tibco, but in what we called our retail service platform. It was a WebLogic. And we did a dojo with Pivotal, and we saw that we could actually do this, right? We kind of proved it out. This stuff that Chuck was talking about, it sounded very much make-believe, right? And unicornish, right? But we proved it out there, and then we started on the Tibco side. Tibco, again, is 70% of our footprint, so it's a big thing to tackle. It's 150 million transactions a day. It's 1,500 operations, SOAP-type calls and things like that. So we literally started migrating it one by one, looking at the different operations we have, looking at some of the more critical items first, and getting those out of the way. But it was, using the BWCE product, migrating that legacy code, getting it prepped, getting it tested, validated, deployed out there, and then all the meanwhile, like Chandra's talking about, integrating it with CI/CD, thinking about cloud native and the 12 factors and things like that. All that was brand new at the time.
How is DevOps playing into that now then for you and your team, and how are you transforming your DevOps operations, and how is that helping you become more familiar with continuous development technologies, for example?
So, again, right, so as Chuck was saying, it is a very opinionated product, the PCF and Tibco, right? So we have to do certain things certain way, like CI/CD, A/B testing, and these things, right? So previously, we still have the dev on other side of the fence, and we were operations, right? So, that's not the way to go forward, right? So, but with these two products coming together, right? We changed from the day one. We took a decision that it has to be through CI/CD. It has to be done. The continuous testing, A/B testing needs to be done, right? So, there was the initial resistance from people, but we changed that culture right now. We are doing awesome. We are doing midday deployments right now, and we are doing tons of deployments over the time. So
the fact that Chandra and I are on talking terms and
well, you guys
genuinely friendly.
This is not the first time you reference this. You've read. Chandra, you're like right in the middle here between these two guys. Literally. And they're talking about these interesting conversations they've had with you. Tell me more about these interesting conversations. What have been some of the? Because every journey has its has its path, right?
Correct.
And along that path, you come to parts of that path where every step of the way seems difficult, right?
Okay.
Every step of the way seems complicated.
Okay.
In a large organization like T-Mobile, what did you find along the way that you had to just kind of keep on, keep on the path? What were the technical issues that you were facing that really affected that transformation?
Oh, okay. At least from the operation side of things, right? We were always worried about capacity. We were always worried about this telemetry monitoring, right? We used to, as Kris was saying, right? It's like 6 months to prepare for a big event, right? So, and the scaling of the application was so. We had to stay all night to do these things, right? When you buy a new hardware, you have to deploy this Tibco software, do the code, open firewalls, right? That's took like 80% of my time.
Yeah.
Right now, I'm not worried about those things. Right? With the PCF coming in, the infrastructure part is taken care. I'm more worried about, just press the button, deploy the application, and then start monitoring, right? And then I give the feedback to my development team. Guys, this is what I need. I'm not getting this telemetry data, right?
So the monitoring piece is a good point. I wouldn't say we were blind before, right?
What are you using for monitoring?
App Dynamics and Splunk are probably our two biggest. We still have a legacy architecture, and so we've got other tools like CA's Wiley and other APMs out there. But I would say AppD and Splunk are our two biggest, along with ExtraHop. On the AppD and Splunk side, just obviously because of the native integration that we've got with the PaaS, the incentive for developers and operators to bind and deploy is just built in, right? We don't have to worry about the granularity and seeing how these services are responding, see how things are reacting. We know now, whereas in the past, we were blind maybe until a customer had to call care, or care had to tell us that they were getting an influx of issues, right, in the system. That's not the case anymore, and that is a good chunk of because of what these guys have done on the platform.
So Rahul, tell us a little bit about Tibco's role here, and when did you guys enter the equation, and it also, maybe you can help us understand Tibco's journey as well about its own infrastructure development and its own modernization.
Absolutely. So I think when we came up with the product that obviously was used in this context, which we call BusinessWorks Container Edition, which is really a containerized version of the core technology, which was always used by a bunch of our customers. Over the first year and a half, I would say, largely within our own labs, we run a set of things in order to obviously validate, test, and see the products. But I personally think, and it's always, I'm guessing it's also proven in this case, that products really get validated when obviously a customer uses it for actual business purposes at scale. I think T-Mobile was one of our biggest deployments for this particular product. So firstly, I think we've got a lot of learning that we've done over the last year and a half. The other aspect in terms of engagement with T-Mobile, I think apart from just having a product which is undergoing its traditional release cycles and updates and things like that, is that obviously because of the scale of their deployment and their timelines, we were a lot more engaged with T-Mobile than with more of our traditional customers. What normally happens in some of these stories is that once we have handed over a product, there's a consulting side to the company that actually engages with them. With T-Mobile is a little bit different because I think they were trying to do a lot of very interesting things and which required a much tighter integration, for example, with our products and technology teams, our engineering team. And I have to say this, I think again, it's apart from obviously fixing the problems, it's been a very rewarding journey in terms of working with, I think, product champions. Chandra and Rakesh from Kris team, I think they've been like very solid champions for us as well in terms of helping us improve our product. Now, as part of all of these things, obviously we realized, as you were talking about the evolution of our own technology journey, and we've apart from just improving these existing product stacks, we've also done some work to kind of rethink how we want to participate in the new model, and that goes back to things like Project Flogo, which is an open source project that we kicked off about 2.5 years back. It's written in Golang, open source from day one with a true BSD style license. The goal again was not just come up with a project that kind of solves these problems, but to get it right in terms of engaging the community, truly participating with the partners that exist out there. So Cloud Foundry, Pivotal, AWS, Azure, all of these that are first-class partners from a journey point of view for these particular side of technologies. And I think that's somewhere even I'm personally very excited to go next with the T-Mobile team because I think over the last 1 year we've kind of solved their most immediate challenge, and obviously we continue to address that. But we look forward to, and I'm sure they do too, to kind of the next step of that evolution, wherein we can kind of solve some very net new use cases with some of these kind of
so let's talk a little bit about the technology infrastructure that you're developing now. Tell us about it. Tell us about the stack that you're building, or a little bit about kind of your process and what you're going through right now.
So at least on the middleware side, right? So we are 80% of our Pivotal Cloud Foundry is on the Tibco side, right? So we are doing all the microservices, right? And we are using the bells and whistles of PCF plus Tibco, right? So again, right, I'll stress on the CI/CD monitoring, the telemetry data, right?
What are you using for CI/CD?
So we use heavily on Jenkins. So we are very heavy on.
Is that going to be able to maintain that? Is Jenkins becoming a little bit more cumbersome?
We're leveraging it as the core of our enterprise delivery pipeline, and as you've probably seen with other folks you've chatted with, over time it does become a little bit of a bottleneck when you've got one team and one platform that's having to be maintained, and the individual domain teams, as we call them, or individual dev teams, don't have some of that control. Now we're starting to kind of federate that a little bit and push some of that control out to the teams, make it more of a self-service type implementation and pipeline where, yes, there's governance, yes, there's standards and certain blockers and steps that you have to execute, but otherwise it's on you, right? Just like it is with the PaaS, and you build it, you own it. Same thing for your pipeline and stuff like that.
But if you're going to be going to 5G, for example, right? You are going to 5G, obviously.
Later this year.
And as you kind of manage that infrastructure, the demands will become greater upon your application architecture. There'll be more need for granularity, right? There'll be more need for having that raw data and being able to understand, what it means. So when you're thinking about that, and you're thinking about the limitations of existing technologies you've had to rely on, what are some of the parameters for your thinking going forward as you start to think about continuous delivery as a mechanism for being able to really understand that raw data so you can make those changes as need be?
Part of the challenge that we've had historically is just the amount of interdependencies across the app. So I think the biggest thing that we've done is, we started to, I think it's Conway's Law, right, around, the technology and the organization being so tightly coupled, right? We started to take a look at our organization, break things down into a domain, whereas before we were platform-based, right? We were very tied to technologies and various applications. Once we started to do that and break these domains down, the teams have their own, tightly bounded context, so to speak, right? They own, say, a finance domain or a billing domain or a credit domain, and now that entire stack is up to them. They can own it, they can deploy it, they don't have to worry about a change somewhere else necessarily, and that helps us move faster. On the technology side, I think, obviously there's been a massive transformation that we've done the last, 2 years, and there's a lot of cool stuff coming up, right? We've heard about the announcements here, and I think we were all kind of, salivating a little bit here in Kubernetes brought up so much because it's an area that's of great interest to us, given some of our legacy workloads that didn't quite fit the mold, for refactoring and breaking down into Spring and PCF, and we want to start shifting things there. I mean, there's a wealth of opportunities still ahead of us for sure.
Yeah, the biggest thing we did in last couple of years, I mean, technology comes and goes, but we changed the people mindset, right? We opened up people to the new ideas, right? Doing things in new way. I think that's what we achieved in last couple of years.
So Rahul, for you, for Tibco, as you see this transformation under, evolve, and thinking about Tibco and its own evolution, what are the architecture decisions that you're making to help continue to be a value back to a customer like T-Mobile?
Right. So I think one of the biggest things we've realized is that not everybody needs a platform any longer. People need more modularized, chunky functionality that kind of fits in better in particular use cases. And, at least I try to think of it in terms of like Lego. You give them nice building blocks, and they can choose to use the one that, matches their structure. One of the things we have started doing, like from a product point of view as well, is to try and break down, the products that we've traditionally had. A good example for, just in context is, what we had with the ESB was there was a central bus and things kind of connected into that. It was a great model. It's been very successful for the longest period of time. But the reality is that a central orchestrator is no longer the most ideal way to kind of do and solve those same problems. So, even for us, we've kind of broken that down. There's a distributed architecture. We still do integration. I mean, the reality is you still have, all these various applications that are sitting discretely and they still need to talk to each other or to systems outside. I think that's kind of, one of the most core and most important things that we've done is to try and move away from always trying to build a platform to rather building more, distributed or, I would say, broken down product components that kind of help and fit based on the context and scenarios most customers would have. Is
that then the basis of your open source projects that you're developing?
To a very large extent, yes.
Yeah.
I think especially with Flogo, what we've been trying to do is make it extremely light so that it's portable and reusable wherever you want, which is a very key part of what we're trying to do. Like for example, we heard at the event obviously about Pivotal talking about Project Riff. They're trying to use that for function services, function as a service of serverless in general is becoming an area of great interest, right? Trying to decouple away from all the initial cycle of provisioning, managing, and keeping things warm, all of that, but really just focusing on the code, getting it deployed, and not caring about who's running it, how they're running it, what's happening. Flogo is really also a very good fit in that context.
And that's Flogo is the hummingbird. That's
exactly, yes. It's Flynn the hummingbird. Much prettier
What's
than
the name?
Flynn.
Flynn.
Yes.
Named after?
Flynn. No, but
Flynn the butterfly. Flynn the hummingbird. Yeah, I remember Flynn. Yeah.
Very popular one. Yeah. No, but actually it's a mascot work that actually a UX team has done. I unfortunately don't have the whole context.
Okay.
But the most important thing, especially for the bird, is hummingbirds by themselves are very light, very featherweightish, and that's a very important trait and characteristic of Flogo as a project as well. Much of the lightweightness actually comes from Golang, but obviously some of the things that we've done to kind of optimize it for those environments as well.
Interesting. So now we face the next year ahead. You're going to be the road to 5G, and in moving forward, what does that say for your own information, for your own architectures on the infrastructure that you're running? Will you guys run your own data center?
We do. Yeah, I mean, we to a large extent still are an on-prem, and we do have multi-geo-redundant data centers that we run and manage, and we are pushing stuff very fast to the cloud. I don't think we're ever going to move away from that. I do think if you take a look at what 5G is going to do for the demand on our services, and especially when you look in the context of some of the moves we've made lately, like with the Layer 3 acquisition back in November or December, right? And you think ahead, and again, I have no knowledge of this. And I've got a chief marketing officer that's thinking about cool things.
Right.
But when I'm thinking ahead and I'm going, man, you're talking about 5G services in the home and potentially content. That's going to put a lot of demand back on our services and our infrastructure to serve that stuff up, right? To serve up the information and stuff to the customers. Which the days where you didn't mind a little widget spinning on your device, that's over, man. So we've got to serve this stuff up quick. It's got to be reliable, and it's got to be always on.
So from an operations perspective, for the next, 6-12 months ahead, what are some of your major goals and milestones from from a DevOps perspective?
Okay. So I think we are mainly focusing on telemetry, self-healing. So, gone are the days like outages, like 1 hour root cause analysis. Those days are done, right? We want to move away fastly from the problem, right? So I think PCF and Tibco containers, right, they helped us, right? So we are doing blue-green deployments right now. So if there is a problem, right, the developers give the code fixes fastly, and we move away from the problems. So, and we are focusing on self-healing. Previously, like the out-of-memory error comes, and somebody has to go manually and restart the instances, but that's no longer the story. So telemetry, and the self-healing is our goal.
And just the amount of transformation and progress that Chandra and the team have made in the last year. It's been amazing. And again, part of that's because the goodness of the platform and Tibco's products and what it provided us visibility-wise, telemetry-wise, out of the box. So we now had views to these things that could take us days of looking at logs or hours of looking at logs to figure out. And then once we figured out, oh, hey, we have an issue, then it's how do we stop it from happening in the future? How do you automate a self-healing? How do you kick off a script or trigger off of that? And it's been awesome.
Yeah. So at Tibco, then, what are the for the next 6 to 12 months as you build out your own architecture, continue to build it out? What are some of the milestones that you're looking at? What are some of those issues? We're hearing a lot about Kubernetes here, right?
Absolutely. Yep. So no, I think we've been a fan of Kubernetes for some time now. We actually have heavily adopted Kubernetes even internally as well as for our products for the last, I would say, 2 to 3 years. And we have a good number of customers who've kind of gone down that adoption curve as well. So, on one side, one of our biggest focus for the next 6 to 12 months is making sure that a bunch of things that we've worked on for the last couple of years from a technology and a product standpoint, is adopted and adopted successfully by some of our customers. That remains a high priority. In terms of areas that we are actually investing in from a technological standpoint, we are actually working a lot on things like serverless, function as a service, that, with Slogo, for example. Similarly, we are also kind of leveraging some of our analytics capabilities to do things like machine learning. This is where you're potentially training your models on things like Google TensorFlow, taking those models, taking a static representation, embedding that, and potentially deploying it onto devices as well. So obviously, applying this to things such as IoT from a very high-level perspective, but essentially taking what we are able to do and A, making it portable so that it's applicable wherever you want, and B, being able to apply it to a completely net new class of use cases where there is lesser and lesser, I think, manual intervention, so to say. And which is kind of what Chandra was speaking as well, right? I mean, self-healing is a good example of that. Potentially deploying some kind of automatable bots, chat bots or machine learning enabled bots at various devices is kind of another area. So those kind of areas are places where we are trying to focus on.
You're going to be busy.
We're looking forward to that.
He's got a lot of energy.
Well, I want to thank you guys for taking the time to talk with us here at the Cloud Foundry Summit. Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Alex. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Awesome. Appreciate it.
The Cloud Foundry Foundation is our sponsor for these podcasts that we did from the Cloud Foundry Summit in Boston, Massachusetts. Cloud Foundry is used by enterprises around the globe to automate, scale, and manage cloud applications throughout their life cycle. Learn more about Cloud Foundry at cloudfoundry.org. Listen to more episodes of the New Stack Bakers at thenewstack.io/podcasts. Please rate and review us on iTunes, like us on YouTube, and follow us on SoundCloud. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.